You're listening to Maneuvering Mondays, a podcast about transforming work culture. This is the second part of the episode, and in this part, we have invited one or more guest experts to share their best advice to Marie from Zebra Apps. Okay, and your hosts today are AK
and Ivana.
And thankfully with us we have you, Gary. And you're a leader from the software industry, and you have both executive management and management consulting experience. So that's a great match. Would you mind telling us and the listeners a bit more about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so my focus is on the application of Lean-Agile and value stream management practices. As Anna has said, I have been around the block and at both leadership positions at all the way up to an SVP level. I've managed a number of, I believe, fairly large enterprise scale projects and programs, as many as 21 different development teams. In that case, in a clinical environment for ICD-10 diagnostic code updates. I've managed teams with as many as 150 to 250 stakeholders. So it's kind of my expertise is how do you get large numbers of people kind of going in the same direction? I would say that's my expertise. And it's not that I try to become the expert in the domain or the technology. That's not my skill. My skill is becoming a herder of human cats, because just like cats, humans don't like to be herded. So you've got to provide other incentives to get them to go in the same direction. Otherwise, nothing works. Everything fails. A broken system. And so I look at everything from a systemic perspective. And as my previous conversation with Anne will show she can probably speak to that. That's how I look at things systemically. So that's me in a nutshell.
And that is an awesome lens to work from to help Marie maneuver. So Gary, we asked you to read a section of the book, the very last section of the book.
Privileged.
Would you mind? Yeah, exactly. You're like the star at the end of the show. Would you mind, like in your own world, just recapping some of the highlights from the text?
Sure. For those who might be new to the story, we have our lead character, Marie, who's been running development in HR, and she's been working there, and I'm guessing reasonably effective at her job, but she's got this issue with some of her colleagues, particularly Mark, who is the HR VP. She also has issues with her colleague, Paul, who's another director in that group. And in the meantime, the engineering department that's been responsible for the development of the education technology products, Oslo, has been struggling. And as I mentioned with AK, my feeling on this is that they lost the bubble. They lost the focus. I'm an aviator, as you can see back here, flew F4s in the Marine Corps and Navy. And so the bubble is a nautical term. Is what you look for when you're on your glide slope into the airplane. Because if you lose the bubble, you might not hit the airplane in the aircraft carrier in the right place, right? So when I use that term, that's what that means. Is they lost their focus, they lost their bubble in terms of understanding what their business was about. Okay, so they're now in a situation where they're financially cash limited. And they've got a product that's on the decline. Their main product, in fact, is on the decline. They have a bunch of small little products that don't seem to really support the company in a big way. And so they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. They come up with 4 basic options. So one is to address some of the infrastructure problems they have in their platform. They built their own data center, which right off the bat, I would have wondered why they did that. So now they got this very expensive infrastructure they have to maintain, and it's not growing as fast as it should. Customer base, and what do we do with that? Okay, and so then they have qualities. And the way it was expressed is that the teams were not, the way I interpret it is they were siloed and not looking things holistically, which goes back to my systemic viewpoints and how we look at the organization as a whole and how they work together and for a common objective, if you will. The next one was the key product. Oslo, as I mentioned, it's not any longer a market leader. They have a good customer base. The customer base has been pretty loyal, but now it's starting to break down because it's just not teaching the way people want to teach today, which the way I took it was the teachers want to be engaged more with their students during classroom time, but they want to make the homework assignments to be where they actually get the instructional content, right? And then the data center, again, getting back to that, it's not meeting up with the demands. And so the fourth issue was they were challenge writing training plans. I thought that was an interesting way to put it. Goes back to that classroom instruction versus, sending people home with homework. I might have articulated it a little bit differently, but my viewpoint there is it goes back to that they really haven't figured out what they need to deliver in the way of a new product and how to support it for their customers' needs. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the basic problem. So Anna, I don't know if you want me to keep going on this, but I'm happy to.
Yes, please.
Okay. So
Continue.
I started my conversation with Anna earlier in saying that the only reason we have to exist in business is because we support our customers. If we don't, we won't receive the financial resources to sustain the business. So from a lean thinking perspective, we always look at things in terms of what adds value from our customer's perspective. And if we cannot identify specifically why something benefits our customers, we might consider that a waste from their perspective, and therefore a candidate for at least being cleaned up, if not eliminated. Some things we can't get rid of. We can't get rid of HR, and we can't get rid of financial and legal, and some of these things that customers may not overtly value, but they are necessary to sustain the business. So they have value there, right? But in terms of the value streams, the work that we do to support our customers, constantly looking for two classic kinds of things. We're looking for wastes that don't add value, and there's 7 or 8 different forms of waste depending on how you look at it. And we're looking at constraints, and I would argue constraints are the most critical. And that comes from Eliyahu Goldratt, Moshe Goldratt's views expressed in his book, The Goal, and later The Choice, and the theory of constraints. So the way that Goldratt expressed his concerns is that if you spend an ounce of effort or $1 on anything that is not an organizational constraint, it's a waste. It's a mirage, is the way he put it, right? Mm-hmm. Because if it's not the constraint, it's not going to improve throughput. It's not going to improve flow, right? And so I have this presentation that I give, and I put the picture in my latest book, The Lean-Agile Way, and it shows this bright green Lamborghini stuck in traffic in London behind 2 gigantic taxis in front of it and a truck behind it, mm-hmm. right? Now, if your only desire is to have the image of being very wealthy and affording a very classy looking car, then maybe it was justified, right? But in terms of what you really bought that car for, its performance, its speed, its handling, right? It's waste. It's a wasted activity. It was a wasted expense, right? That car needs to be in a different environment, right? And that's what happens to us in business, right? You have different people looking at different parts of the organization and seeing things differently. And in one of my previous books, Scaling Scrum Across Modern Enterprises, I have this picture. It's an old story of 5 Indians, continental Indians, right, who are blind, and they're surrounding this elephant, and they each touch a different part of the elephant. And so they have a very different view of what the elephant is. One thinks it's a wall, touches the side. Another one thinks it's a snake, it touches the tail. Another one thinks it's a big rope, and it's the trunk, right? And somebody else touches the ear, and thinks it's a fan, right? So you got all these different viewpoints of what the organization, in this case, the elephant, is all about and what it's for, right? And that happens to us in business too. And so we get in this constant firefighting mode because everybody wants to, from a systems thinking perspective, they want to optimize at a local level, right? They want to fix things what they see, all right? But if it's not the constraint, it's the Lamborghini problem, right? And so what happens is then we get the egos involved, particularly the vice presidents who control the funding, right? And they're pushing for their agenda, right? So they think they're right, all right? But they can't know if they're right if they're not looking at the end-to-end value stream of how we take a concept and deliver it to market and then sustain it, right? Because they might be just promoting a Lamborghini. So what happens is whoever has the biggest clout, the biggest voice wins temporarily. They put their resources there. It fails, right? Now all of a sudden somebody's over here is crying and somebody's over there is crying out loud, hey, we've got problems over here, we got to fix. And so now you put your resources over there and then you put it over there, put it over there. And we just constantly go back and forth, right? And we don't fix anything because again, we haven't looked at things systemically, right?
Yeah. And I think just a quick reflection on mine, I think this is it's a very good picture for how we've seen Marie struggle now for 6 chapters, that she's then she goes deep into the engineering department and she tries to solve the problem locally, exactly as you say. So what would be the right thing to do if you wanted to first map your value stream and then get all of the VPs to look in the same, or to see the same when they look at the problem?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So in our book, we promote this concept of value stream networks. Now it's been around for a little bit. Mick Hurston referenced the concept in his book, Projects to Products. And he talks about the components of a value stream network that enable the business. So he talks about process information. That concept too is not new. I was working with that concept 20 years ago at AT&T in our service organization, and we call them business enablers. So what enables our business? People, process, information technology, and we also must argue it's our products and services, right? So the reason why Mick wrote his book, Projects to Products, is because we get focused on the projects. Those are short-term Lamborghinis, right? They're fixing a problem, right? And they're not looking at the continuity of the product in terms of meeting our customers' needs or our services, right? And so what we have done is tried to articulate a bigger vision about how you align your resources to support your customer journey. All customers have a fairly reasonable set of steps, if you will, that they go through in their journey and when they're trying to solve a problem. So first they're identifying they have a problem, then they're looking at alternatives, right? And then they're making a decision, purchase decision, build, buy, or make, right? And then they're implementing the solution and living with it and sustaining it, right? So we can look at those as actual touch points in our customers' journeys. What we then want to ask ourselves is, well, what are we doing to help our customers at each of those major steps in their journey? And so here, we want to step away from what might be our traditional organizational hierarchical structures and say, but that's not going to help our customers. That may help us manage people and resources, but that doesn't necessarily help our customers. What we want to instead do is look at the workflows that support each of those steps of our customer journey. And and we call those workflows in Lean value streams, nothing big about that. A value stream is an end-to-end set of activities. There's a trigger that initiates it, some need, right? There's a set of common activities, standard processes that we know how to do to be productive and efficient with improved throughput and high quality that we want to be able to repeat, all right? So there's a flow of work, right? And materials and information and people that facilitate that value stream. And there's a deliverable. There's something that comes out of that at the end that's necessary to support our customers' journeys, right? So a value stream is fairly simple. There's a trigger, set of structured activities that we know work, and a deliverable. And we want to align our work that way to support our value stream activities, touch points, what we call them, so that we are meeting the needs of our customers. Now, we also need to be able to adapt and evolve. And that's the point of Agile. And that's what we refer in our book to Lean-Agile, not Lean or Agile. It's not an either or situation. You need both, right? Because Lean gives us the ability to be productive, efficient, and high quality, and make sure we maintain that quality and get consistent output, right? But the world changes, our business needs change, the market drivers change, the competition changes, and our customer needs change, right? So we have to have a way to adapt and evolve, and that's where Agile comes in.
Can I ask you, just kind of going back to what you are saying about creating the structures, identifying the value streams, but also keep monitoring the market to understand, well, have the circumstances changed? Should we adapt internally to the external circumstances? Who should be doing that in an organization?
Well, okay. I'm going to say something that will maybe offend some people and maybe not.
Yes, offend people.
Usually people, when they think about it, will respond positively. We have this contrast in the world between Lean and Agile, right? Lean came out of Toyota, where really after World War II, you're talking about a country that was isolated. They were, very much having to rebuild, right? Everything. They had to import all the materials in and export all the products out. So when you look at that, you'd go, how in the world could they ever compete? And that was the problem facing Toyota. And so they began to look very, very rigorously at how you identify and discover and eliminate waste. All right. So their problem, as they saw, was how do I become so efficient and productive that I can compete on a global market? Agile came out of the software community, and they were addressing a fairly different problem, right? The problem there was the original proponents of project management were implementing the traditional waterfall approach in IT, okay? And where waterfall works wonderfully if you don't have set changing requirements and you have predictable processes and you can design something with pretty good assurance that it's not going to change, dramatically, right? Then waterfall works pretty well. So, if I'm building a utility plant, if I'm building a freeway, if I'm building a building or a ship or something like that, waterfall works pretty well, right? Because somebody's probably not going to come in the middle of production and say, let's add another 100 feet to the keel of the ship. Probably not going to happen. Okay, good. And you could probably do it, but it's probably not cost justified. And you can do the design work up front. But in business, everything's dynamic. Everything's changing all the time, right? So in this case of our story, they have obviously built different products along the way, and they still have their flagship product, Aslo, but it's fallen behind because they didn't stay current on understanding what the market was doing and where their competitors were going. They just lost the bubble, totally lost. Okay. And so they weren't looking at that value stream management. So to answer your question, I didn't forget. Right. The problem with the Agile people is that they've trivialized product management. Right. They define
that's a good point. That's a really good point.
They did. And I have some different background experience with that a lot of people don't have. I managed a team at AT&T Global Information Solutions that created services, professional service offerings, like you would create a product, right? Because we were supporting 4,000 business consultants, 16,000 technical consultants, and 10,000 management consultants operating then, I think, in 94, 95 countries across the world. And so real world situation, Alcatel wanted us to implement SAP in a plant in France, and then they liked it. And so they want us to do it in Brazil, but it was like a different company, even though it was still AT&T Global Information Solutions, right? So how do we have the same kind of quality, right? So we were developing services with all the components that we could hand over to another service delivery team and help them deliver the same kind of service product, right? And so that was a product management function, all right? Scrum came at it from a team level perspective, right? The advocates of Scrum. Scrum is an effective way to manage a small group of people, maybe two teams at most, right? unless you go to team of team concepts, which is a totally different discussion, right? So it was geared toward helping teams be as efficient as they can at change, managing change, coming up with novel solutions to problems, solutions. Okay. And that works very well in that kind of environment. That's a sound I haven't heard in a while. um, not a problem. I love it. I'm
Sorry.
surprised you haven't heard my dogs.
No, I haven't heard the dogs. But this is a
That's-
child.
Yeah.
That's my kids today. Anyway, so the situation with Scrum is that they created this role called product owner. It's a tactical role. It's not a strategic role.
Yeah.
The strategic role belongs to product management and product marketing, and they have to work together.
Mhm.
And there's a diagram that I used. I didn't put it in this book. I put it in other books, and I put it in my presentation. It's called the adaptive productizing model, and it was created by well, it's run by a university now, but I think it was actually created by a Silicon Valley company. It was designed to help software companies in Silicon Valley manage the activities in product and marketing management together. So they identify 5 core processes and 25 key activities. So all those are value streams. They all have a trigger. They all have a set of standardized activities. They all have a deliverable, right? And they all support various aspects of that customer journey. Okay, so I love that model. And I still show it to this day because it shows the complexity of how things get very quickly, right, in our world. And that's not a product owner role,
Mhm.
right? They may be part of that, should be part of that, right? But they're representing the customer's interests on a tactical level. Somebody's got to be doing a strategic level, and that's a product management, product marketing role. Now, there's others involved too, because we've still got to develop products. We've got to do testing. We've got to do quality. We've got to do delivery. We've got to do, supply chain management.
And then there's also the whole, like, if we consider the company as a product, there's something about building a mechanism that achieves the value that the company has set out to do.
Yeah, it goes back to, well, let's go on to the next part of this conversation, all right? So how do we look holistically at our company, right? That's what value stream management is all about.
Mhm.
Value stream management came out of the Lean community. It's at least 20 some odd years old. And it was a way to look holistically from end to end, concept to delivery, continuously, not as a one-time thing. Going back to that projects versus product discussion, right? It says we deliver products and they have a life cycle. They have an economically viable life cycle, which is very irrelevant to the story, right? And if we don't stay on top of it, they're gonna become uneconomically viable more quickly. Okay. If we stay on top of it, they may last longer, but eventually they're going to end a life, right? And we need to be looking at what our customers need next, right? So value stream management is a methodology first and foremost. And I say it that way very clearly because it got taken over by the IT community to connect software chains in DevOps environments. Nothing against it, because now you have real-time visibility into what's basically an electronic world, right? You can do analysis and what ifs, and you can make changes dynamically on the fly with modern value stream management platforms. But DevOps is a small part of our world, right? There's this whole other part of our business, which is supplying value to our customers, right?
Yeah.
And so my goal with the value stream management consortium as an ambassador, one of its ambassadors, is to get them to look at changing the paradigm from workflow type tools to a value stream management orientation where we instrument the organization as a whole. Okay. That's a conversation that requires deeper time than I can get to it today. But let's talk about it from a methodology. What we want is a way to identify, prioritize, and plan those improvement opportunities that will give us the biggest bang for the buck. And we have to do it across all our business enablers. So we have to look at the value streams. We have to look at the people, process, information technology, and our products and services holistically. Can't look at one in isolation, right? Because now we're back to local optimization. We're back to green Lamborghinis, right? So thing we want to do is employ, we in our book, we describe a 9-step methodology that takes an organization through a series of continuous loops to identify those opportunities that will eliminate constraints and waste, and a way to use metrics to figure out what will give us the biggest bang for the buck and tackle them. Now, in the reality, when we look at things systemically, holistically across the enterprise, some of those things are going to cost money. So you're going to have some sort of portfolio management function, which is right next to strategy, right? That says, okay, we only have so much money to spend, so many people, right? We have partners we can go out to and vendors and all this kind of stuff, right? But we have limitations, right? I'm an economics undergrad as well as engineering kind of background and master's business. And the first thing they teach you in economics is 101. Everything in the universe is a resource, and by definition, all resources are limited.
Yes.
Right?
Scarcity.
That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what that means to us is we have to get the biggest bang for our buck again, and we have to know where that is. And so we have to look at holistically at the constraints first, and that also often will lead to the waste, right? Just identifying the waste, the root cause assessments will get us to the waste, right? That is causing that delay. Okay. Delays are a bad thing because they hide defects, they create excess work in process, excess cost, quality issues, all kinds of bad things. So we want to attack those. All right. Now, so if, however, that expense is more than that team that's responsible for the area can justify, they're going to have to go ask for money. Let's just be real, right? You don't get to make that decision on your own. Right. And that's one of my problems with agile advocates is because team-based, they have this concept of retrospectives. Nothing wrong with it. A retrospective is at the end of each sprint, you look at yourself as a team, maybe you're working with another team, and you say, what can we do better in the next sprint, right? Very next sprint. That's the whole point of a retrospective, right? It's not a long-term thing. It's not a capital equipment investment kind of thing. It's not meant for that, right? Value stream management gives us that mechanism to look holistically and say, okay, this is our bottleneck. This is what we got to fix. And it's going to require investment. And here's the way we go to portfolio management and get on the priority so we can get it. And here's how we get the resources together, right? So value stream management is a very effective approach to making those kinds of assessments and whittling. And those companies that do it very, very well, once they become competitive, you can't catch them because they know to keep doing this until they screw up and they lose the bubble and quit doing value stream management. You're not going to catch up to them easily, right?
When you say we, who is it? Like, should this be anchored with the like executive team, or would you recommend that it would be an external person facilitating, or like who should be part of this exercise?
Yeah, my recommendation is you set up if you're of any size, right? You set up a value stream improvement team, we call it? Okay. And there will be a lead who really understands Lean-Agile practices. And in a smaller organization, those people are going to be borrowed resources. In large organizations, I would suggest you consider making that one or more teams, right? Probably by one team per product line, right? And this is another discussion too. Most companies have a product, all right? Larger companies may have more than one product, but it's still probably only a handful, right? So if I'm talking about an automobile manufacturer, I'm still making cars and trucks and buses, right? Those are my products. Everything else is a make and a model, right? And probably can be built in the same factory, right? So there's a visit for how you are organized, probably by the facility or what have you, right? The product line at the facility level in those cases. So what you want that team to do is go through this methodology, and I'll just go through it real quick. So the first thing is you got to get sponsorship, because if they don't have sponsorship from the executives team, right, it's not going anywhere, because they're not going to get the funding. They're not going to get the leadership they need to drive what changes have to happen. The next thing that has to happen as part of that is they identify the value stream that they're assigned to. Okay. And here I'm thinking holistically. Now, when we talk about in our book value streams, we categorize them into 4 types. there is the product, the main product flow. Okay. Supporting the product flow are all these operational. So if I look at that adaptive productizing model that I talked about for product management and marketing management, it's 25 activities right there. Okay. So all those are basically 25 smaller value streams that are supporting the product value stream across that customer journey, right? So larger organizations could have hundreds, even thousands of value streams potentially. Okay. And so you want to identify the product value stream. You want to teach the people who are affected in that organization Lean-Agile concepts. That's the next phase. Then you want to envision, in an ideal world, what would our value stream look like, right? If there were no constraints and whatever else, and we don't look at how we do things now, we just say, what are the main activities we'd have to do? And actually, I went this way, I should have gone this way, right? We start with the output and we work our way upstream, because when we do that, it forces us not to look at how we do things, but to say, what's absolutely necessary to support this next downstream process? Then you go upstream one step and you ask the same question. What's necessary from the upstream process to support this process? And you keep going until you get to, the beginning of the process, right? So that's that what we want to do in the vision stage is simply say, okay, how would we do things in a perfect, okay? Then we have to get to reality, right? And that's when we do our current state value stream hunting. And that's when we begin to identify all the gaps. So we look at how we do things compared to how we'd like to do them, right? And we begin to go, oh, well, this is what's really going on. We do our gimbal walks and we go out and see how things are really going on out in the organization and talk to everybody. And because all that information is out there, it's not some executive, suite or somebody's, cube. It's how the people doing the work, right?
Can I ask here, how does the individual experience waste?
Well, if I'm out there, right, in the field doing something, whatever it is, it's my frustrations, whatever I'm frustrated at, right? I'm waiting on material, I'm waiting on information. I don't have the part numbers. I don't have the customer name for an order, or some key information. I don't know, we're not getting parts in time, or materials in time or information in time to do my job, right? That's what the purpose of Gimbal Walks is, to go out and find out what everybody's frustrations are, right?
That's
and they
very
might even have a
interesting.
solution.
So work frustration. That is when when we're frustrated at work, that is when we should notice and think, maybe I'm frustrated because there's waste in the process.
There's waste in the process, right? Exactly. There's something that's not wrong. There's a constraint or a waste that's affecting my ability to get my job done, and I'm getting hammered for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Think about it. That's what started the whole agile movement. It was software developers getting upset because they were getting blamed for a waterfall model that didn't work in a dynamic environment of business, right?
Yeah.
Where everything's constantly changing, and they didn't have a structure for managing that change. And I would argue Scrum didn't even give the tools to decide where they should focus. That's value stream management.
Yes.
Right? Value stream management says, okay, this is our priority. This is where our constraint is. These are the wastes. Now we know where to attack it with our agile teams.
Yeah.
Right?
In the story, Gary, we have Marie who starts engaging with the engineering department and tries to figure out, what is actually happening? Why are we experiencing these financial problems? They identify the messed up costs and revenue structure. All these things happen. And in the story, the senior management is somewhat out of the loop. It is more of a grassroots movement. There are some people that have intentions for Zebra. I would be curious about your thoughts on this phenomenon.
Was that clear enough?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'm a former Marine, so I think something about leadership.
Yes. Tell
us.
People would have, and there's a good book on team of teams by General McAllister, I think his name was. I can't remember now. But people would have who are not in the military would have probably a different idea of what leadership means than what they think it is, right? If you were a bad leader in the Vietnam era, on a Navy ship, you might disappear overboard one night. That's kind of what was true. Okay. If you were a first lieutenant in Vietnam and your troops didn't trust you, you might not make it out of your tent in the morning. Okay, that's the reality. So people would have a different understanding if they weren't in that environment of what leadership means. Leaders are out in front, they're not behind. Okay. And they're engaged and they're constantly asking their people, what's going on? How can I help you? What can I do? The whole servant leadership philosophy, it even lives in the Marine Corps, believe it or not, right? If you really trust your troops to know their jobs, then you expect them to do it and expect them to tell you what's going on. And then your job is to help them fix those things at your level where you can. That's the whole point of leadership. You can't do that from an ivory tower. You can't do that from a city somewhere else without engaging with them. Now, we live in a virtual world today. I'm not saying you can't use modern technologies to engage with your employees, and you can and you should, right? But you must engage. You must know what's going on. And you must come at it from not a point of view where you're telling them you screwed up, you didn't make your numbers, right? Because you'll turn them off and you won't get the information you need to fix it. Okay. So that's my view of leadership.
I would be curious, in this section of the story, we learned that some of the employees from Zebra Apps are banding together to start a new company. What do you think the chances of success are for this new company, given what the characters have learned?
Well, did they hire me?
If yes, then they will succeed.
You can't answer that question because what type of culture are they trying to create over there? I'm guessing it's a company that's been around and there is a culture there that is working. Okay. They saw a need and they addressed it by going after Aslo. So I say those are all positive indicators. So I assume that they're going to come in there and if they're a smart company, they're going to look at that product. They're going to say, okay, well, now we're going to use it in this Ukraine environment for security monitoring, right? Applications. And they're going to have to ask themselves, okay, where's it working well? Where's it not working? So that's from a product level, right? Where are we on target? Where are we missing? What do we need to do to evolve the product? And then they're going to have to look internally at their own delivery processes and say, okay, looking at our value stream, customer journey, right? And our touch points, right? What do we need to do to make sure that we're aligned with our customer needs so that we're constantly evolving the product and also constantly evolving the infrastructure to deliver and to develop, deliver, and sustain the product, right? And that goes back to, for example, where this company went wrong with the data center, right? They created their own data center. Who would do that today with all the options out there and platform options, right? Because now they're constrained. They've got a fixed cost asset that only gets more expensive as they have to grow it. And then if they have to replace it, they're bearing the whole cost of that. Okay. And then you've got a situation where if they need to upgrade or modernize or whatever else, they take on the whole cost as opposed to just going out online and saying, okay, I want these development tools and I want this much storage capacity and I want this much network capacity and yada, 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 right? And be able to tailor what they want. So today, outsourcing is a strategic tool. And that's one example, right? I would argue if something is not your core process, and also the smaller you are as a company, the more this is true, you should probably be outsourcing that activity. Whether it's HR, legal, even to some degree finance and whatever else. Smaller organizations should be probably outsourcing that. Bigger organizations may take it inside if they can do it more efficiently or add more value to their customers. And even then, they're probably going to outsource pieces of it, right? Because it's a strategic tool, whether you consider them partners or just an outsourcing vendor, right? Doesn't matter. the point is, it's part of how you extend the company most effectively and efficiently. If you can do something more effectively and efficiently than the outsourced partner, then you should do it if it adds value to your customers. But if you cannot, then you have to be honest with yourself. And you need to make that decision before it's too painful to make. That's what's happened with their data center. It's now too expensive. And now they got to figure out, what do? Do we sell it for parts? Do we start a whole new business? That's what happened to AWS with Amazon, right? They started a whole new business out, right? So on. So it's just they waited too long, right? If they had been constantly doing this value stream management activity that I told you about, right? And I didn't even finish that. You do your future state, right? You figure out what you need to do and your gaps, you get your funding, you then implement the change, and then you go back and start and you continuously loop around this cycle, right? Until the product is no longer viable economically, in which case you end of life it, right? That's the methodology. So if they had been doing that, they wouldn't have been in that trouble. They probably wouldn't have made that decision to start with, right? To create their own data center. But they would have certainly made changes earlier when it became the bottleneck, right? For the waste that was tossing the money and resources that, there were better alternatives for. Again, idealized, how are we doing today? Current state, what can we do differently? Future state. Those three steps are just so critical. They have to be revisited over and over and over again.
I had just a few questions on one topic, and then I think we need to start rounding off. But I just am very curious to hear your thoughts on the idea of self-managing teams, because I think this is something that Zebra Apps has tried to have, and I think that previously in the book we learned that this is working very well in the finance department, and I think it also previously worked well in the engineering department, but then they got this new leader Jenny, and things got tricky. And I was just thinking of a very specific situation in this section where Marie has joined this area to kind of start coaching Jenny and start helping with fixing the collaboration issues. And then what happened is that all of the product teams in the department started talking and sharing knowledge, and then they came up with this idea to do a new thing for their sprint goals. So now they set these value-based sprint goals. And when Jenny, the VP of the area, learns this, she has this comment that she thinks it's undermining that they did this without involving her. And that's part of my question is, like, what do you think of this, like, in a self-organizing department? How involved should a leader be in a case like this? And then also my other question is, with your background in Lean-Agile, and you talked a bit about the difference between Lean and Agile and how they need to go together. If you think what you said about Lean is that it's a way to be efficient and productive and have consistency, but when you then have self-managing teams, the teams are free to make their own ways of working, and that will not necessarily be consistent across the different teams. So I know these are two kind of different questions, but I think it's within the same.
Yeah, it's actually going to be a good segue to the frameworks too. So let's address the self-managing team question. Okay. Again, true story. World War II. The Japanese were just flummoxed because when the Marines would invade the islands to try to take them back, they were used to a situation where they would effectively go after the leaders, right? And it drove them crazy, because then the next person in line in chain of command stood up and kept going as if nothing had happened. I mean, obviously it had, right? The military has never saw a reason to get away from having leads at the team level, platoon level, company level, division level, brigade level, right? So on, right? Because and here's why. And when I was at AT&T and Global Information Solutions, right, you would get into these discussions a lot of times where, again, everybody has an opinion. That's my definition of stakeholder, by the way. Anybody who has an opinion that matters, and you may not even realize that they do if you're not careful, right? Customers who have an opinion and go online and talk about what they're happy or not happy about the product is the stakeholder, right? So, but within your team dynamics, right, you can get in these situations where nothing happens because they all have an opinion or they go off in their own thing, right? And they're not really working as a team anymore.
Mm.
So my view is you need a servant leader type person at every team
Okay.
level, right?
Mhm.
Who basically, and this is where I'm going to go away from dogma in the Scrum world, right? And I'm a believer in
Mm.
Scrum, don't get me wrong, right? But when you get in situations like that, sometimes somebody's just got to say, I've heard you guys all out, but we got to get going.
Mm.
And this is going to be the decision. And we're going to see how it goes. If it
Mm.
doesn't work, we'll fix, because that's the reality of the world, right? We live in this dynamic world. We have to make constant adjustments, right? And you want the team to be able to work together collaboratively and make those things together, but they're just not always going to be on the same page. And somebody's going to have to make a decision, be responsible for that decision. And that's and it's not a dictatorial position, or they'll lose the team,
Mm.
right? They have to be seen as somebody who listens, takes in all the input, has the right discussions, and then says, okay, let's take a vote. If the vote's not there, we're going to make it. I'm going to make a decision. Right. That's my
Yeah.
view of leadership. Right. Now,
Okay.
there's also this concept of middle up, middle down leadership. Japan hasn't really gotten rid of, the Toyo, their middle management, and the
Mhm.
Lean world has not gotten rid of middle management. Let's talk about that too for a minute. You really can't, the bigger the organization, because while the executives are responsible for strategy, and team leads are responsible for tactical execution, there's always going to be this place in the middle somewhere where somebody's got to make sure that's connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we call that, top up, middle down management. And in fact, and I forget their names, but the people who wrote the Harvard article that Schwaber and Sutherland
Mhm.
credited for creating the Scrum concept. A later paper by those same authors discussed this, right? They just didn't happen to read that paper or implement the Scrum concepts, right? So there's this bridge that needs to happen, particularly large organizations, right? And so making sure that everybody's, in fact, the communication flow is working, right? So large organizations, more complex organizations, that structure doesn't go away, but their role again changes to being servant leader and making sure that they're accurately conveying the strategic objectives of monitoring and managing and whatever else to the tactical execution so that everybody's online. So there's that. We introduced two frameworks in our book. One's called BLAST, Basic Lean-Agile Solutions Teams, and the other one's BASE, Business Agility System for the Enterprise. So they operate at two different levels, right? So in our view of the world, we don't create a team level model. We just use Scrum, that's fine, right? We implement a team of team levels strategy, and that occurs at the last level. Now, let's talk about the realities of how teams of people have to work together. The research is done. We know small teams work better than larger teams. At around 10 people, stuff starts degrading very quickly in a work environment, right? So the average is in Scrum is 3 to 7, maybe 9, right? Beyond that, things rapidly fall apart in the ability to manage that team, right, or make it effective. You can have more people in, training environments and things like that, right? Maybe up to 20 people in a training environment, those kinds of things. If you're just conveying education, you could have very, very large teams, right? If it's a one-sided here's the latest going on in our company kind of environments. But at the team working level, 3 to 9 people is probably right. When we look across an enterprise and we look at all those touch points I talked about, the value streams touching and intersecting our customer's journey, and that there could be just in product management, product marketing, 25 value streams, right? That are supporting it. Yeah, some people are working on more than one value stream. I get that, right? But the reality of it is things get complex very, very quickly, right? And so, and most of the time we want them working in a lean approach where they're focusing on being productive and using standardized processes that are maybe published on the wall somewhere, just like in Lean, right? And we want to maintain the quality and all those kinds of things, and and so on, right? But we know that we're going to have change. So we're going to have teams that are going to come in, agile teams, probably from IT a lot of times, because so much of what we do today is IT enabled, right? Or improved through IT enhancements. But there's going to be domain experts in there. And a lot of times those domain experts are borrowed resources. They're the domain experts from the product management team, maybe, marketing team, right? Wherever, development team, right? So they're borrowed resources. So in their day-to-day job, they are predominantly operating in a lean mode. But when they join these agile teams, right? Some people in the agile team are permanent, but they're experts. They're different strategies. Nexus has their network, integration teams, which are basically experts that come and go. It's the same concept. Scrum, has their Scrum ambassadors. Same concept. It's somebody who represents team's interests across multiple teams, right? But in a lean agile environment, it gets a little bit more complex because Scrum was never really about lean, even though they say it was one of their things. It really wasn't. They don't really talk about the 5 principles of lean, right? They could argue that they're a lean way of managing change. I'll give them that. Okay. So the reality of it is that you have people who are doing their day-to-day jobs in lean and teams, and you got other teams that are acting more agile, and you've got these people who are transitioning, who are basically supporting it, right? So if I'm like in my last project, I'm doing a systems integration project, creating a new financial report and integration, I'm going to need the domain experts from finance, right? And probably even the professional service organization that they're supporting to support that agile team to make sure they get the requirements. It's not a full-time position, but they need to know that's a priority, right? To manage that change activity. Okay. That's what BLAST is all about, managing and coordinating the work of multiple teams, some operating more in lean mode, some working more in agile mode, and integrating their work, right? Where it makes sense, and using these experts, domains, transitional people, right? My other point is this is the base framework, business agility system for the enterprise. We also have to look at, we need to be able to incrementally deliver what we call new iterative increments of value, right, to our customers, right? And that's a whole enterprise problem. So we have to look at how these BLAST teams are coordinating their activities to deliver new increments of value on cadence. That's what BASE is all about. So we have our team of teams framework, managing lean and agile teams, multiple teams, and then we have our enterprise agile, which is all about delivering cadence to continually drive new value to our customers. Okay,
and just to and that is really interesting. And if our listeners would like to learn more, this is what will be covered in your upcoming book. Yeah. And what is the name of the book, and when is it coming out? Just so people can find it.
The Lean-Agile Way.
Yeah.
I co-authored it with Al Shalloway and Steve Pereira and Richard Naster. And they're all experts in these areas. And they're all authors in their own rights, as well as practitioners.
And Gary, where could our listeners find more information about you?
Okay. I have a website. It's almost done. I'm refreshing it now. It's called commandresults.com. That's my company name, Command Results. So, commandresults.com. I also have a training site, and it's called Lean Agile Practices, but the actual site is called unlockleanagile.thinkific.com.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to hear your perspectives on this very last part of the book. So it's really sad actually to round off this last episode. But thank you so much for joining us, Ivana. Did you want to add anything?
No, thank you so much for coming, Gary. It's been a treat to have a true expert in how to make sure that a company can actually achieve their targets. It's a great way to round off.
I hope this was helpful.
Very, very much so. You're listening to Maneuvering Mondays, a podcast about transforming work culture. What are your thoughts on Marie's situation? Have you had a similar experience? And what would you have done? Join the conversation on our LinkedIn page and let's maneuver Mondays together.